to the Weekly Bioanalysis, a KCAS podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the 45th episode of the Weekly Bioanalysis, the official podcast of KCAS Bioanalytical and Biomarker Services. KCAS is a bioanalytical CRO serving the pharmaceutical and biopharmaceutical industries for over 40 years. My name is Dominic Guarino, and I've been in the LBA and cell-based assay space for a little over 28 years now. I'm here with my co-host, John Perkins.
Hi, I'm John Perkins. My focus is on LCMS technologies, and I've been in the LCMS bioanalytical space for around 26 years.
John and I are senior scientific advisors at KCS, and either or both of us are available to answer any questions you may have regarding this podcast or any of KCS services. I'm located here in Kansas. John is in upstate New York, and our producers are in Missouri and Kansas City, so we're somewhat all over the map. We are excited to have you listening to the 45th episode of the podcast, which is now available virtually everywhere: Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Amazon, and many others. Wherever you choose to find and play your podcast, you can now likely find the Weekly Bioanalysis. We welcome all of you, whether you are joining us for the first time or if you are a regular listener. And today we have a special guest. It's my pleasure to host, it's our pleasure, John and our pleasure to host Chris Young, who is our manager of program management. Chris?
Hi, John. Hi, Dom. Yes, this is Chris Young. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
As many of you know, if you've listened to our podcast previously, we started this podcast when COVID restrictions prevented us from continuing business as usual. So in lieu of maybe going face to face, we thought we'd try to communicate all of you with this podcast. Well, this was something we had thought about previously, and so it's come to fruition, and here we are on podcast number 45. So if you're not familiar, the podcast will be a review of the latest news and resources, and then a focus on a topic of our choosing before discussing any feedback we've had from our audience. We're constantly looking for topics, and we'd be happy to discuss something that you might want to cover. So please do post your thoughts on our podcast. Then we will wrap up with a little teaser for next week's episode, letting you know what might be coming in the future. So again, we are amped up to have you here. It will be a fun episode. To kick us off for podcast number 45, John is going to go over today's podcast a little bit more before we jump into the news and resources. John?
Sure. Thanks, Dom. Hi, Chris. So today it's the usual structure. We'll start with the news, looking at some COVID news first, some good and bad, and then it's non-COVID news, similar emphasis on good and bad. And then we move into our main topic, which is talking about the value of a dedicated program management team, which is why we have Chris here as someone who's intimately involved in program management, actually leads our team at KCS. He talk about what program management is and the benefits of that to us and our customers.
Okay, John, why don't you kick us off with the news? Let's start, as usual, with some news on COVID. John, what are we going to talk about today?
I thought the first one could be a brief news item, but it's a bit of a soapbox moment where CDC director, quote from her, COVID-19 morphing into pandemic of the unvaccinated as cases spike by 70%. This sort of builds on, well, it's not so much just the Delta variant that we talked about last week, but the US where things were declining is now starting to see a rise in COVID-19 cases. With an increase in cases up by nearly 70% over the previous 7 days prior to July 16th. And the bulk of those cases are in people who are unvaccinated. We know that breakthrough cases occurred, but generally with vaccinated people, the less severe. And we know of at least one person where that happened. But it's our moment to just reiterate, please, if you can, get vaccinated, because it's to the benefit of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well said. It's becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated, which is, this is such a polarizing topic, John, right?
It shouldn't be.
And yeah, really, I mean, for you and I, it's pretty simple. And I'll even share my 15-year-old got his first vaccine because we're like, look, you're going to school, you're going to get it. He didn't have any side effects. He's fine. He'll get the second one in a week or so. But it's troubling in that the industry works so hard to get this available. Science is there, and then no one wants to take it, or at least I don't know what's the vaccine at, like 60% or something. It just depends on the state. I think it's kind of a good move to try to go into these states. I don't know about sending 100 staffers out into them, but whatever to help boost it and kind of, the numbers are kind of staggering. We'll talk a little bit more about some outbreaks and the numbers and how they're looking more like they were about a year ago, and that's troublesome. But yeah, John, I think this is a feel good story, and one that we hope maybe we'll see a spike in vaccine rates rather than spikes in hospital to those that are unvaccinated. But it's unfortunate, and let's hope more people get vaccinated.
Yeah, I honestly, to me, I don't know how to address it. I mean, I think somehow communication has to be better. What being vaccinated means for people around you. I've seen increasingly news articles all emphasising the fact that the vast bulk of cases that are being seen are unvaccinated. The vast majority of fatalities are unvaccinated, and
Oh
it's
yeah,
please people just get the vaccine. I mean, I hear arguments that it's not been it's only authorized, it's not approved by the FDA, but ultimately there's millions of people
yeah,
have taken multiple forms of the vaccine, and the safety stats just
it's staggering.
it's there. It's
Yeah,
these are
airplane.
generally
It's
safe.
airplane safe, John. It's
Yes,
airplane safe. Get on that airplane. Yeah, don't worry about
exactly. Anyway, that's
it.
that's our
Yeah,
first brief
and maybe
topic, but it
just
actually,
because it's so
sorry.
hot, I think I want to add that, um, we talked about this initially. These mRNA vaccines have been given to immuno-oncology patients or orphan disease patients for decades. So this thought that there's this what about the long term? What about the long term? Well, that concept, I think, is not only have people been vaccinated for over a year or maybe a year and a half, some of those early phase 3 trials, right?
Yep.
I want everybody to understand. There's no real lingering effects. This is just an advancement in science, and man, go take advantage of it.
Sure, and honestly, I'd rather be here to test the long-term effects of a vaccine than not be vaccinated and never find out what the long-term effects are because I
Yeah,
caught
and
COVID and died.
in my world, it gets crazier. I know a couple and their two children. They're vaccinated. They went away to Orlando the same week I was gone. They came back. All four of them got COVID,
Oh
even though the
wow.
two that were vaccinated, symptomatic. I mean, and I wonder, sometimes it's hard to discern the information that
Hmm.
it just almost seems unbelievable. That sounds like a perfect storm to have, both of them vaccinated and then being symptomatic. You hear a lot about the vaccinated who might be asymptomatic. But anyhow, John, I just know that efficacy rates against the Delta variant are very high. They're in the 88% for, I think it was the Pfizer vaccine. It was, and the other one I saw was AstraZeneca was high. But let's move on, John, because
Sure. Yep.
your
Yeah.
country's doing some funny stuff,
Yeah,
aren't they?
yes, being stuck in the US, I still watch what's going on in the UK with interest. This has to be emphasised. This is only England. This is not Wales or Scotland, who are being much more cautious on things. But basically England. The headline was England's COVID unlocking is threat to world say at 1,200 scientists. And what has happened here, as of July 19th, England has really backed off on a lot of the controls that were in place in terms of restrictions. So the all legal COVID restrictions were lifted from July 19th. The government shifted focus from state imposed restrictions to personal responsibility. And there's been a lot of like memes on Twitter and stuff where you talk English people and
Mhm.
personal responsibility. And I don't know if you saw it before the Euros final, where there was one photo that went that basically did the rounds everywhere. And just before the final, there was at least one England fan who was caught with a photo with a flare or firework up his behind, and
Oh,
that's the
Jesus.
person. That's the kind of person you want to give personal responsibility to. And there's lots of other
So,
instances. So limits on social contact in England has disappeared, meaning people can meet inside or outside with as many people as they are happy to see. There are no longer any restrictions on the number of guests at weddings or mourners at funerals. Large-scale events such as festivals or large sporting events no longer require certificates to go ahead, although organisers are encouraged to use vaccine passports to ascertain who's been double jabbed. This is this weird, we're giving you a guideline, but we're going to make it really vague and difficult to really monitor. Limits have also been lifted on businesses, meaning clubs can reopen and theatres and cinemas can return to normal capacities. Rules on social distances have also been discarded, and masks no longer mandatory but recommended on public transport. Again, this waffly approach that England seems to take. But this is this is against the backdrop where the Delta variant is taking off, and we're seeing new cases in England that are higher than they've been since January 2021. So it's actually almost in the worst case scenario. We're not talking removing controls when things are back under control, like they did in Israel and like they did in the Netherlands. And then both countries sort of said, we've done this too rapidly and we've caused issues. I think the Netherlands opened nightclubs and saw then a cluster of COVID cases, and the Prime Minister then apologised to the country for doing that too quickly. But so where these scientists are coming from, basically Britain's position as a global transport hub means this really makes it easy then to then disseminate, the virus if people are coming in and out. And I actually read elsewhere in the week that the UK has green, yellow, and red countries that you can visit from, and there's no longer doing any checks from people from green or yellow countries. Well, they can still be infected coming in from those countries. It just means it's lower risk than the red countries. So it's like a whole, lifting of controls with it, not in a time when the situation really doesn't merit it, in my opinion. And in the opinion of a number of scientists too.
It's very strange, John. So first, there's a very, what I'll say, eye-opening photo when you see what looks like a bunch of youth in UK, kind of thousands marching through London on 27 June, calling for restrictions to be lifted. Of course, if you look closely, it just looks like a moving fraternity party, right? So,
yep, sure.
But it's to me it's eye popping because it's just packed, right? And then so you got, I think, look, I'm not there, and I'm just my opinion and kind of my own, maybe even observation here in the US. It seems like half the population is just like, we want to open up, and the other half's kind of like, we want to be a little more safe. So, but this concept of just it seems assertive to open up completely. What's changed from what's the rationale behind it is lacking to some degree, right? Like, why suddenly on the 19th of June or July, excuse me, whenever they open up. But more importantly, it's the numbers, right? Like, you see this graph that's in this article we got, John, and the cases is like 40,000 cases a day or something.
Yeah, sure.
I'm looking at that, right? And that's higher than even like when the pandemic started back in March. Of course, we locked down and we saw rates, and then kind of opens back up and they spike back up. And so, but John, I think this, I don't think there's any going back. I feel like the people of UK, at least of England, I think have spoken, and maybe not, hoping that people don't get sick is not a good plan, John.
No, absolutely.
When we sit around and we talk about, well, we hope, I'll be the first one in the room to say, hey, that's not a plan. Hoping is not how we're going to resolve things. So I think it's like a to be determined thing. I'll just add that here in the US, we've got, you mentioned the other countries are not doing that. That's kind of how it feels in the US, right? We got certain states that are implementing more, going back to mass mandates, and that's the choosing of those particular counties and cities and so forth. And then you have really some states that are just, I don't know if defiance the word, but they're really like, not going to happen in our state. So some of that, even, back to England, we'll see more in the coming months.
Yeah.
But here in the US, we've got a similar, tidal wave, especially as schools open up, and maybe we'll touch on that in a little bit.
I think basically, England has set itself up to be the petri dish that everyone watches, because they are this is an extreme, to just go from lockdown to opening everything up. This is extreme, and I mean, it's a dense population. You got an island that's, it's 50 odd million in England, and well, it should be interesting to then watch how Scotland and Wales, what happens with England versus Scotland and Wales, because, like I say, those two countries are much more closed down and being much more conservative on this. But I am very worried, and that's why I wanted to at least raise this, because I think it's not good for the country, and it's not good for elsewhere.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there, John, but it's
Sure.
coming at a time when, even our guest Chris and I were on a call with a client in Australia, and they're like going back on lockdown. And
Sure.
so parts of the world, and you mentioned Israel. I know Israel has gone through, they're at any moment they might be back on lockdown, and they're just okay with that. They're even considering the third boost of the vaccine, which I know is getting some mixed reviews. But
Sure.
my point here is the rest of the world seems to be taking a little bit more of a cautious step, and here we are, the UK and even the US to some degree. I like how you worded it. It's like, oh boy, are we going to be the petri dish of the
Yeah.
world at this
It's
stage?
it's 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 almost like they were giddy from the Euro finals, and it's like, well, what else can we do to make people
Yeah,
feel good?
I
Let's
know.
throw away all the restrictions.
Yeah, like hey, while we're at it, everybody's happy. Let's keep the momentum. But
And just very quickly, I'll move on to another similar topic, and it's basically as a result of this, because the messaging is so mixed. Vaccine uptake is dropping in England. So the article again, both are in the Guardian, but it was looking at Manchester and Sheffield, and because actually the UK has done relatively well in vaccination, and that's what we need to emphasise for the previous story. The government is relying on people being vaccinated to drive them behaving well. But like I said, you can't just put it on personal responsibility. People will do stupid things. I mean, I tend to be better behaved. When I was younger, I did lots of stupid things. So the problem now they're seeing particularly in these highlighted cities of Sheffield and Manchester, the young people that they really want to roll out the vaccine to, because they're hearing that, oh, we're opening up and things are all okay. The uptake of vaccines has dropped massively. So they have, big, plentiful supplies, plenty of volunteers to administer the vaccines, and no one's taking them. So yeah, it's almost like England has really figured out how to have another perfect
Well,
storm as if
that
things are.
that's see that was where I was, as we were talking about the previous. This is disturbing.
Yep.
You're opening up and your vaccines rates going down, and I don't know what's going on in Sheffield, but only like 30% of the population in Sheffield's vaccinated. They're, as you said, they're lined up, ready to go. They got the ability to vaccinate. Like I think I read close to 27,000 people in Bolton area of
Sure.
Manchester. I think that's what they said, and you just the fact that that's awesome,
Well,
but no
yeah,
one's going, right. So that's really it's kind of this, John. I would have thought it would have been the opposite if I'm running, the English government. It's like, okay, we're going to open up because we've got
sure. Yeah.
80% of our not and trending the right way. However, I don't know. Maybe, and as I sit here, I'm talking myself into, well, if they open it up, maybe the vaccine rate will go up as people. I don't know, John, but
Yeah, I don't know, but then
it's tiresome.
then there's a lag. That's a lot of the issue here. I mean, if it opens up, more people get sick, vaccination goes up again, but you've still got an increased wave to deal with. Just
Yeah,
just to touch on Sheffield, the overall rate isn't high, but actually the over 50s who were
yeah,
obviously first population, their uptake was great, but
yeah.
they're only a small pocket of the population, and it's the young people that are now the issue
And
in terms of rolling it out to them.
as I explained to a friend about this is like getting a vaccine is like kind of like putting a bulletproof vest on, right? It's
Sure,
not like you're fully you're never going to get it, right? Like it just means it's reducing your likelihood, and you're protected if you're now put into you're vaccinated, everybody around you is unvaccinated, and maybe even contagious. That at some point, if you get too much, virus, the vaccine's just it's not gonna work, right? You'll get it'll be overtaken.
sure, yeah.
I don't want to get into like this is something that they don't know. So we're skirting the line. Like I've talked about this early on. If you could tell me how many COVID actual viral particles it takes to make me infectious, you've got a test there. That would be a very powerful test.
Yeah,
We
and I
don't
was
know that.
just
And then
reading. Yeah,
sorry,
sorry,
John,
go
I'll
on.
just add,
Yeah, sure.
that the people that are vaccinated now, frequently they might be testing positive, but the reality is they just intaked it, might have come in contact with someone, the body's remedy. Of course, the virus might aggress, but they've got an immune system, so they're testing positive and they're asymptomatic, or
Sure,
even, I don't even know if they're infectious. And that's the other thing. We keep saying people are positive, but are you infectious? And there's no test really for that. Are you virulent? I mean, that's a very different sort of mindset. And John, we'll move on, but this is,
sure.
good Lord, I really hope I hope our slight pessimism on this issue is wrong, John. We hope everybody's going to be okay. But again, that word hope is not a plan.
Yeah,
Go get vaccinated.
No, you don't defeat a pandemic with hope. No, absolutely not. And like, I will obviously keep watching this because I've got family in the UK that I'm watching this all the time because I want their life to return to normality, etc. But yes, let's move on.
Yeah.
This is I just this is an interesting article. It's Novavax's effort to vaccinate the world from zero to not quite warp speed. And this was on Kaiser Health News. And it really, as much as anything, highlights the difficulty that these developers face. They might have a product, but then how do you get it out to market? And Novavax are an interesting case because their vaccine hasn't been authorized yet, but they hope to apply for authorization later in the summer. And we've talked previously about this vaccine. It's not going to make much of a difference to the US, but certainly it's a hope for the rest of the world. But Novavax actually, and I know you've alluded to it in the past, they almost went out of business, and I
Yeah.
hadn't realised quite to the extent of how they went out of business. But they had a previous vaccine that failed, and so in an attempt for the company to survive, they sold off properties, and they obviously cut down on staff. But then COVID hit, and now they're trying to develop a new vaccine in a situation where all the resources that they've had are no longer to hand. And so it's the article is very much about the challenges that a company in that situation is facing. Because it's not just developing a vaccine; it's building a company from the ground up to actually develop and distribute that vaccine as well. So it's yeah, I'm going to leave it there and then pass it back
Yeah.
to you, Tom.
Well, I knew they were struggling, but there is some interesting. Novavax has never turned a profit, and then we handed them almost $2 billion, which is funny, or 1.6 billion. But yeah, this goes back to, look, they're not. This is more. We're very blessed here in the U.S., right? We have options for vaccines. This Novavax is more of the traditional vaccine. I believe it's like their
But
M
they
M
have
technology, right? It's more protein based, right? Um,
they have a nanoparticle vaccine. They mix it with Matrix M, which is an immune booster. It's a
yeah.
proprietary secret ingredient, which comes from Chilean soapbark trees, and that actually also has an impact on their distribution because that's also used
Yeah.
in root beer and Slurpees. So they don't have an exclusive. They're not exclusive in terms of use that part. So then they're in a fight to even source
Yeah,
it.
John, it's been very hot here lately, and if you take away Slurpees, I'm telling you that could be a real problem. And then root beer, parents across America are going to be very upset if they have to give a caffeinated drink at night if you can't get root beer.
So, as someone from the UK, I find root beer completely alien. I
It's not
just
my
don't
favorite,
like the
John, if it helps
smell,
you,
don't like
but
don't like the smell, don't like the taste. What
I'm not even a big. I don't. I'm not even a big Slurpee fan. But that
so
that is kind of funny. It goes back to like COVID supply chain issues, right? The
yeah
7-Elevens across the world are competing with Novavax now, right? So,
yes.
but back to, so it's a
It's
traditional vaccine. So even though it's a nanoparticle, it is more in that kind of doesn't probably. I don't think it needs the cold chain. Certainly not the
no, it
lipid
doesn't.
nitrogen.
It doesn't.
So that
No.
becomes why it's so advantageous. It's effective. This is good technology.
Mhm.
This is another one that we hope makes its way to really fix the pandemic. Or
Sure. Yeah.
to
So
really
yeah.
squelch the pandemic. We need vaccination across the world because I don't know about you, John, but I'd love to go to Barcelona next year to see their conference, right? So
Sure. Well, sure. I actually got a text the other day from a friend in Madagascar who'd finally he had a drive out of the Madagascan capital and had then taken a film on the dashboard of his car, and so it was like, yeah, I really want to go there again, So
yeah. Well, I want. Well, I'm coming up on 20 years of marriage, and I wanted to do something nice. I think I told you we were thinking about maybe taking a trip down the Danube or something, and all that has to get kind of put on hold. But
sure,
John, we're running long as
sure,
usual, not
sure, yeah,
surprising. Let's, because and we could talk about the vaccine for again, a whole podcast, which we've done in the past. But this one is, we're going to get into some of the more, I don't know, funny is what comes to mind, but it's not good. The more, the
Sure,
less glamorous. Let's see.
sure.
Well, bad people do bad things, John.
I
Tell us about
just want
this
to
California
say
woman.
one last thing on the
Sure.
Novavax. You did mention it, that it has shown very good efficacy in trials, so I'm sure it will make it to market and prove to be, a definite gain in terms of how we treat
Well,
the virus. But it's just
and
we got to
John,
get
as
it
we're,
right.
just as a point, I don't know if you saw this, but I think yesterday J&J's vaccine is making its way through, despite some hiccups here and there. But that's becoming the one, for the rest of the world. Maybe not
Sure,
here in the U.S., but anyhow, that's a good news story there,
sure,
to know
yep.
that the world might get a vaccine. But John, we've heard some crazy stories about people giving PBS as the vaccine or water and faking that. But tell us about the woman.
Yes. So
And then I know there was a funny story on a flight too, but go ahead and tell us this one.
this is always the no matter how much positivity you can find, you can always find the negative in people when you're looking for stuff for this podcast. And it says California woman arrested for making fake vaccine cards, Justice Department says. And this is a woman who, she was licensed as a homeopathic doctor in California, and she's the first person to face federal charges for giving out fake vaccine cards. With the Justice Department also alleging she sold pills that she falsely claimed would provide lifelong COVID-19 immunity. So she's faced Julie A. Matzi of Napa, California, is facing one count of wire fraud and one count of false statements related to health matters in the case. So she was so I think it said elsewhere. She I can't see. Yeah, she practices naturopathic medicine and claims on her website that she uses the traditional medical science as well as ancient and modern modalities that rely on the restorative power of nature to heal. I love the fact the article had the disclaimer: naturopathic medicine isn't based on science, and naturopathic doctors are not recognized as medical doctors. So she just said she gave patients oral pills that she called homeoprophylaxis immunization pellets, which she claimed contained small amounts of COVID-19 would provide lifelong
Uh,
protection. And then she gave patients cards to say they'd received the Moderna vaccine. So yes,
I,
I
I just,
would pass that back.
I'd love to have lunch with this individual, to see what was motivating you here. Like, you are, everything you just said. I'm laughing because I'm really crying, John. Like, this reminds me of like 1980, 1800s medicine, where, snake oil salesmen here in the U.S.
Exactly.
would run around
Yes.
with, like, cough syrup and claim, or actually most of the time it was some sort of opiate, like, hey, this will make you feel better, right?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness
I
gracious.
think
I
this.
wonder what she had in these pills. People goodness gracious, make sure you pay attention to, like, go to a Walgreens or a CVS. And I know not everybody has access, but John, this story just made me laugh a lot. And there's a couple things. I'm going to add a few things. One, within this story, by the way, the Buffalo Bills are, if you have a vaccine passport, they're going to have full capacity at their stadium, which is that's another interesting thing over time as we get into, the Premier League will open back up here in another 30
Sure.
or 60 days in the NFL. But I digress. So back to this kind of fake story, John. Did you also see that a gentleman dressed as his wife took her vaccine card, and got on a plane? And I don't
No,
know
I
how
didn't see
or
this.
why. I forget exactly the circumstances, but he had, and then as he went into the bathroom on the plane, he changed and came out as a man, and someone spotted him, and they, arrested him because he was, he didn't want to take the vaccine. So people are doing crazy stuff, John. I think that this is an example of, like, I don't know if it's cabin fever striking us or what, but this is almost like a Hollywood. Like, this is something I expect to see on Netflix, right?
Sure.
Not
Yeah.
actually happening in California. This is California, I think, right? It's just like, oh my goodness, this seems like it should be a Netflix special rather than something I'm reading about in Fierce Biotech, or this is in the, I think, the
Yeah.
Forbes
I think
magazine. Unbelievable, John.
I think
Unbelievable.
there is an element of cabin fever about some of the way people are behaving. I think, I think it's that release once which is why the England thing is so worrying. There's
Yeah.
that you have restrictions lifted and people go mad. So yeah,
Well, John, it's funny. I do think maybe the population has an impact because we're out here just, in Kansas City, and and people are kind of living, and we're not. Well, I guess I should stop short of saying hospital visits and so forth, because I do know Kansas City, Missouri is
Yes.
they're not going to mandate it. I saw nationally they're suggesting it or something. They're not going so far to mandate it, but I think you'll see some masks pop
I,
back
I,
up in the more heavily populated, and that's okay. That seems okay. And then, of course, there's huge debates about children wearing the mask as they go to school, and we'll touch on that in the coming podcast, right?
sure. Yeah.
John, we're going to switch gears because you can see I'm getting excited because we're going to talk about something that is non-COVID related. But this is John.
Actually,
When I read this article, go ahead. You got something else?
one last thing on the COVID. Did you
Sure.
see about the NFL issued I think a
Yeah.
ruling yesterday that if there was a COVID outbreak within a team resulting from unvaccinated players, it would result in the forfeit of games.
Yeah.
I think was the so that I mean I don't think we necessarily need to say much on it now, but that would certainly be interesting to
Well,
watch.
that is a way of forcing players that don't want to get vaccinated to get vaccinated,
Sure.
right?
No, understood.
You're going to put a lot of pressure. I think there's one guy. His name's Cole Beasley. He's just said, "Hey, I'm okay, and I don't. If I get sick, I get sick. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just don't want the vaccine. I shouldn't be forced to take it." So he's kind of on that ledge. But now when you're in a locker room with, I think there's 64 guys on a team. I don't know the exact number, but when you're jeopardizing their livelihood because of that becomes a different kind of element. And there, John, you're right. They're talking about you would forfeit the game. The other team also doesn't get paid for that game. Neither team will get paid.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, that was really the striking home moment. There was, if you forfeit the game, not only is it a loss, you and your opponent don't get paid.
Wow. Okay.
So it's and I think I heard that right. But anyhow, that becomes there's a lot to be determined around some of that, which anyhow, John, we're going to move on to the non-COVID, and this one really, I didn't even know we hadn't gotten this without. Okay, John, it's go ahead and tell us a little bit about it, but I didn't realize we weren't as advanced in this sort of setting. But
sure,
why don't you share this, because I think it's a great story. I think
I'm just going to say, really give the headline and then really let you run with it. It's basically in a first, Micron starts testing microneedle vaccine in kids. A company called Weekly Bioanalysis, who are based in Atlanta, has begun trialing a microneedle-based measles rubella vaccine in children, and it's with the London Tropical School of Medicine, and the trial is being carried out in the Gambia. It's a phase 1-2 study, and it's the first time that a microneedle vaccine has been tested in pediatric patients. And if this works, there's lots of potential for this for the long term. And I'll let you go because it seems you're excited to talk about it.
Yeah, John, it's a great story, right? First, it's reaching that I call it resource poor. I forget what the word is now, but those nations that really need the help, where needles and skilled phlebotomists or even nurses are all at shortages, as well as just in general, the whole process might require someone to walk a full day to get to a literally a tent so someone can give them even just basic medicine like measles, mumps, and rubella type vaccines. This is a patch that can be put on, and it dissolves over time.
Sure.
And it gives a subcutaneous injection. Just great stuff. I mean, this is like, none of us want, even I think I told you the big reason why my 15-year-old didn't want to get the vaccine was he just didn't want the shot, right? That was his rationale when push came to shove. He's like, I'm kind of scared of needles, Dad, and I don't want to get a shot. And I'm like, oh, good. That has to end. You got to get over that. And of course,
sure.
He's fine now, but we all have. I still don't like shots, right? I don't know if you know that about me. I still hate giving blood. I don't like it at all. But this type of advancement is really pretty cool, because now you've got, I would imagine it's going to be temperature resistant, because you can do a lot more in this sort of like gel-like matrix they're using. And then I think not only that, maybe you can ship it much easier and distribute it, and rather than having to, put a 18 gauge needle or 21 gauge needle onto a syringe, extract something out of a vial, and then vaccinate someone, it's like slapping a Band-Aid on.
Sure.
So this is huge advancements. And I guess I didn't realize that this was like the first efficacious version of it. I remember hearing about this. I'm gonna date myself, about 20 years ago when I was in grad school. This is almost for me as great a moment as when Carl June and autologous T cells got advancements in CAR T cell. This is another thing that I feel like in our lifetime has become advanced, and really hope that the Medical Research Unit of London through the Gambia gets this out there, and you can just see how this could be a wonderful thing for pediatric studies and or
Yeah,
just pediatric vaccines. It's great. It's
it,
great
it,
stuff, John. I love it.
it's an interesting trial where they basically start them with adults to show it works between 18 and 50. Then they plan to enroll 120 toddlers aged 15 to 18 months, and later 120 infants aged 9 to 10 months. I agree. I mean, in terms of, the Ed Clark, who's leading the study, he's at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He's basically saying it's easy delivery, like you mentioned. I mean, if you're just slapping something on someone's arm, that's great. Reduce cold chain, and we've talked
Yeah.
about that in terms of other vaccines, and then the absence of sharp waste, and that's, I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, you
Yeah.
don't necessarily think about that, but not having to
Mm.
dispose needles is
Huge.
a big deal, It's
Huge expense, and
yeah,
again another thing they can't manage. That needs to be incinerated. That's a
sure.
huge expense.
Yeah, yeah. So hopefully they expect to read out the first half of 2022. So we'll definitely be watching out for this one with interest, because the nice thing about these kind of stories is they're telling you the future of where medicine's going, and the type of things that are being explored. And I have to say, before starting the podcast, I didn't pay much attention to drug delivery, but really
Yeah,
it's fascinating, the
great.
technologies that people are employing to try and make drug delivery easier and more efficacious, and ultimately help patients. And it's like I say, a fascinating part of the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, it's kind of the engineer in me that's always wanted to come out. So I really have enjoyed the device space, and it anyhow, John. I think we got maybe time for one
One
last
more,
one,
yeah,
and then uh, this one is again one that we like to keep it real here, John. So tell
sure.
us a little bit more about this one.
So this was an endpoint. A unicorn built on lies. Founders of Sanofi partner may face 20 years in prison for allegedly profiting from stolen Genentech trade secrets. And so I think take-home message is, be careful who you invest in. But this is, a while back, Genentech accused Taiwan's GHL Biotech of stealing information through one of its senior scientists. As a JHL, which had scored a pact with Sanofi to market biosimilars of Genentech's top-selling drugs, has since settled the case and agreed to shut down any related work. However, what's happening now is the CEO and COO of GHL are now they've been indicted to basically defend what they've done, or they're under trial for what they've done. And so it was a couple who worked for Genentech, a woman called Xanthi Lam and her husband Alan Lam, who committed theft of trade secrets, passed on the Genentech SOPs to GHL. And so there were their employees who basically their job was removing the Genentech logo and sticking on the GHL logo. And it was they moved biosimilars through the research pathway incredibly quickly,
Yeah, of
because they
course,
had
of
an
course. They
NSI
got a
to do it.
roadmap,
Yeah.
John.
So and I mean, it meant that it meant that for the two individuals are, let's see if I can find their name. I have
It's
it's
Lynn and Giordano. Yeah,
Rachel Jordanov and Rose Lynn. Rose Lynn was the COO, Jordanov was the CEO. Um, and so, I mean, if they're selling or trying to make deals with other companies, it was all based on false
yeah,
information,
John.
and it inflated. I mean, the it nearly became a $1 billion
Yeah.
company based on basically theft from
So,
Genentech.
so our guest has been waiting patiently, so we're going to wrap this up, and
Sure,
we're
I'm
excited
gonna
to
let you
talk to
say what
Chris Young. But this is once again, I mean, John, bad people do bad things. This is just unbelievable. So they said upwards of 90 SOPs that were just like straight up stolen from Genentech. So shame on the individuals who stole them, but good. I mean, really, the culpable people here are the COO and the CEO who
Yes,
just took these and ran with it. I mean, this I guess the silver lining here is the
they
long
got
arm of
caught.
the law will find you eventually, John.
Yes,
I
yes,
really do think it does. You just can't get away with this stuff, or at least that we hope. And they were fined only like, I guess they were fined $250,000, but they could serve 20 years in prison. And well, John, I think they should see some prison time if you
And
want to
just
know the
just just
truth.
just to say one last thing, when we talked about the previous story of the false vaccine cards, etc., what was the benefit to them? They actually
Money.
federal prosecutors, it's money in this case, and they said that the company spun $101 million in cash out of the scheme. So yeah, it's you can see there's quite a financial
Jeez.
incentive for that.
I mean,
Yes,
and it makes you wonder, like, wow, people are just throwing their money around, right? Like, oh my goodness. But John, we're gonna move on. Although, we're gonna skip our last thing, which
yes,
is the
absolutely.
FDA
Yeah.
is facing a backlog. Maybe we'll pick that up. But that's good, kind of good news. They're starting to open up a little bit to address things. But without further ado, John, let's move on to our main topic, and this is something that's really a critical um, piece and service of KCS. So let's get crack-a-lack in here, John, and we'll let Chris Young maybe first. Chris, welcome. We're excited to have you here to talk about program management at program management in general and program management at KCAS. Chris, why don't you? I know you kind of introduced yourself during the intro, but why don't you kick us off? Say hello. Tell us
And
a little bit about yourself.
I'd
Oh,
just
go
like to
ahead.
say one thing. Yeah, I mean, we like to touch on what all the different groups within KCS, and we had a discussion a couple of weeks ago about project program management. Sorry, and for us, we can see the huge benefits of this team to the company, and we thought it's time to get Chris
Yeah,
on here to talk about
and we'll
program
add that.
management and what it means.
Yeah, and we'll add that. Hey, we've talked about our CSL and test materials management, and Chris, this is the first time we've really brought up program management, but we have had other, things that sometimes are overlooked in terms of importance and criticality to drug development in a CRO. So, Chris, without further ado, go
Yes.
ahead. You got the stage.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I appreciate giving the opportunity to join you and discuss this. Yeah, a little bit of background on myself. Yeah, my name is Chris Young. I have a degree in molecular biology and microbiology from the University of Central Florida. Earned it way back when the years started in '19. I've got some bench work experience. I've worked in research for veterinary vaccine companies locally, as well as a company that specialized in veterinary diagnostic kits. You think lateral flow devices for companion animals and ELISA type kits for livestock and poultry. And I also, for a time, I ran the bioassay group at a local contract research organization. I've been in program management for about 8 years, and I'm just a few months shy of 3 years here at KCAS. And I manage the PM team, which consists of me and five other PMs.
Chris, you're being humble. You started the PM team here, so that's one thing I want to bring up. The other is you've got a team of five, but that is fast growing. So,
Sure.
Chris, thank you for that nice introduction of yourself. But you've really, I think, put the footprint on our program management, and I want to emphasize that to our audience. So, Chris, as we dive into our agenda here, I think the first item is talk a little bit about the definition of program management and then the role in our industry. How about to start
Oh
there?
yeah, sure. Program or project management's been around for millennia. As long as a group of individuals have been working together collectively to achieve a common goal, there's always been someone that's tried to, coordinate and manage them. But really, the what we would consider the modern era of project management started in about the 1950s, and it's pretty logical. As you think about the economy shifted from agriculture and industrial manufacturing into more engineering and science-based, technology-based jobs, it became evident that really you need a role of someone that helps facilitate communication and manage projects to keep things moving. And when you think about kind of some of those achievements in the 50s and 60s, you really couldn't put a man on the moon without individuals and teams of individuals working together collectively to make sure all of those pieces dovetail nicely to in that common goal. So overall, really 1950 wasn't that long ago. It's been 70 years, and the role has kind of evolved and changed, and as tools have been implemented that help facilitate. But for the most part, the 50s and 60s are when it became an actual job description that people could aspire to. And I will say there is a difference between program and project. The terminology, I'll probably interchange them a little bit here. But a project is an individual undertaking meant to achieve a goal, and then a program is a series of projects.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Chris. And I'm going to say the word, I mean program. If I say project today, I do not mean that. I mean
Mhm.
program. So I want to clarify that. Chris, you unpacked a real lot there.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Well, you just educated me on how the infantile status of program management in general, right? So that you're right. 60 years in a long time. I love your analogy. You're absolutely right. There's no way Neil Armstrong and his team land on the moon without incredible program management. So with that, John, excuse me, with that, well, John, hey, maybe I'm taking up a lot. Tell
No,
us,
no,
John, go
keep
ahead.
going. Keep going.
All right. So I think you nicely. I hope the audience understands what Chris is alluding to there in terms of program management and its criticality to, not just agendas and timelines. That's an important piece of it, but there's some critical traits to what makes a good program manager. And Chris, I'd like you to maybe
And
highlight with that for us.
And even if I step in a bit, I mean, the value of someone in that program manager role, if you're, and we're talking the scientific realm, if you're a scientist, it's easy for you to get focused on particular pieces and lose sight of the overall picture. I do it, other people do it. To have that independent person who's really watching to make sure that things progress and help things progress is an incredibly valuable role, and it can actually bring you back on track to sort of move things in the direction where they need to go, and like I say, it pull things to if you're in a project, if as a scientist you tend to go down these rabbit holes, but if you have someone who's looking at the overall picture, say, yeah, that's interesting, but what we really need to do is this, that's
Right.
actually really,
Exactly.
really helpful.
Yeah, let's focus here. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's really kind of one of those key things, as Dom was alluding to, is what really makes a good program manager, and really organization is one of those paramount traits. When you're tracking a thousand different moving parts, really you need someone that is super organized and understands and is able to access information at a minute's notice. Just because that's the key aspect of the job, is to keep things on track and know where things are. So to me, one of the major things that we look for in program managers is a good sense of organization, and then second to that, really is communication. We need to be able to facilitate communication between clients and our scientific and technical leaders. We need to make sure we're messaging things. We don't cause a panic by using imprecise language. So we really want to make sure we have individuals that are agile communicators as well. This is something that KCAS we look for, is people that are able to communicate however the audience likes to hear, right? So when I have a client that just likes to pick up the phone and call you, we're gonna be able to handle that. Or we might have ones that just want to do updates by email. We communicate the way that people best like. And then I think the final trait we look for is really enthusiasm and forward thinking. Um, we a lot of times we lose sight of the work that we're doing is beneficial to the world. Our clients have a enthusiasm because they have a vested interest in the success, and we sometimes need to realize, yeah, the products that are coming forth are potentially saving lives and treating diseases, and we need to have program managers that bring enthusiasm to the table, that make sure everybody on the team understands the impact of what they're working on. And then the other aspect is being forward thinking. Um, by nature, a lot of project and program management is reactive to where things currently are. We need to know where things are and how things are moving, but we also are looking forward to see what potential roadblocks are in the way, because part of what we need to do is remove those obstacles before we hit them. And to that end, we really have a strong uh,
Yeah.
background with our PMs. Really have a strong scientific background
Yeah.
to
And
fit that role.
Chris, you've often heard me say, "Hey, you and your team got to help us avoid getting hit by the bus." So that's
Sure.
wonderful what you
Yeah,
just said.
that's key with the forward thinking piece, definitely. And I mean, for me, when you talk about communication, it's not. the main skill set isn't just communication. That obviously is important, but that ability to convey bad news, but
Right.
not don't derail things by conveying bad news by panicking the customer. So
Correct.
if you do that right, then because ultimately with its science, things won't always go right. With bad news, you want to convey it promptly, but you want to convey it in a way that you come together with the customer to work through it to then get things back on track, and that's a really important skill to have.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. Our end, I say good news travels fast, but bad news should travel faster, and that we need to have a plan when we present news like that or
Sure.
data that isn't what is expected. We
Yeah.
really coach our team to come to the table with solutions.
Yeah.
Um,
No, it's important, and the actually, I think the internal communication on some of that helps to really be successful on the external side. Chris, there's a few things I want to take a small step back because you said some critical things. Thank you for all that in terms of
yeah,
what makes a good program manager, right? And so, um, you talked about what I've been coached and taught about as a flexible personality type, and that's wonderful what you were touching on there, Chris. So one of the key strengths of any program manager is you've got to deal with highly driven people. You've got to deal with people that are what we call an I side, if that makes any sense to those that know DISC. And that's people who are highly impressionable. And, they really, here I am and I want to be the center of attention. And then you've got your slow and steady people. And, those are more the people that are pretty quiet, maybe introverted. And then you've got what is called a consistency or a C side. And those are people that like, it needs to be A, B, C, D. If you go from A to D, they get very upset with you. So this is one of the real strengths, and that I think is exceptional on your team. And then the enthusiasm piece is great too, Chris. So that is something that I think we as at KCS do well. And then lastly, that forward thinking piece, and that touches on maybe one of the topics we talked about leading up to this. So we talked about what separates us at KCS. Can without this is a hard question for you, but can you give some examples of some of that forward thinking or maybe some of the tools we have to help with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, the biggest overall tool that we have is that we are the entire PM team works closely together. We're not siloed by projects, so we kind of see into everybody's project. So if we see an issue that's occurring with one client and it might have the similar issue with the second client, and it allows us to kind of point out, oh yeah, well, we had that issue, but we figured out it was a bad lot of substrate. Well, the other, another PM could point that out to the lead scientist that they to kind of point those solutions together. I think one of my colleagues, she just posted a blog not long ago about project and program management, and she noted that we have combined 65 years of kind of scientific experience. And then when we add, the resource of the two of you to it, that's well over 100 years. So we do have quite a depth of pretty much seeing everything that can be seen. Um, and what we're starting to do, we have yet to implement it, is risk assessments, in which we do kind of lay out. It's one of our initiatives for this year is to try to lay out a risk assessment for clients to kind of say, okay, here's what you might encounter. Let's mitigate. Let's fit out our mitigation plans and our contingency plans so we know what to do if we encounter some of these issues.
Chris, I hate to interrupt you right there, but boy, that is powerful what you're saying. So this would be like if you make these types of decisions, it could impact your IND submission type moments, or put your data lock in jeopardy type moments. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. For
Oh,
example, yeah, moving forward with the validation without when you might change a formulation on your API, there's a risk there, right? That's a major risk. You might have to revalidate or do, and that's the kind of things we want to kind of put in front of a client in advance so they're aware of what decisions they make would have impact downstream.
Oh, that's great, Chris. Yeah, please continue. That's wonderful.
hmm So again, I get back to kind of the experience that we have, that we're working together and we're working as a team to kind of make sure we understand what the clients need and make sure we're hitting those goals.
so how just just as part of it, how do you divide things between the teams? How do you assign what each person does?
You mean which? Well, we're aligned by clients.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
what
what I
you?
really want. Where I was coming from. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, and I mean, I think maybe we could get into is kind of what the benefits are
sure.
of project management, and that's kind of where it leads. Um, we mentioned projects versus programs, and since we are program managers, we serve as that single point of contact for clients. So, despite the number of methods they're doing, it might be across business units. They do have that one single point of contact that has um, the holistic view of where everything is. And then it also, I think, John, you were kind of alluding to other as well, is the program manager has a what I would call soup to nuts view of the entire project from while internally it might move from one team in development to another team in validation, the program manager stays with the project throughout. So we have that consistency of I know where we started from and I know where we're going. Um, so that's
And
one of the
and
big benefits.
and I think it's crucial to have that single point of contact for the customer, so they
Yeah.
always know where they can come to. And
Yep.
my previous position, we used to have that same focus where it was a single point of contact, but we actually combined with the pro what we called them project managers, but they actually did both the timelines and then the science or the execution of the projects. For me, it's incredibly valuable to see those two split out, where the scientists can really focus on the science and getting the executing the project, getting the data out, and you have someone independent who's helping guiding them through to get to hit the timelines, because timelines are the most critical piece for your customers that you're working with.
And the budget, which I think at
Sure.
KCS our PMs are partially for. But Chris, to your point, when we look at things like ADC drugs, um, that requires numerous methods, and frequently it's two LCMS methods. And at KCS, that might be a single principal investigator. Typically, it is. But then there's a total antibody method,
Yep.
typically an ADC method, and then an ADA method, a total ADC method, and a total ADA. Frequently, we'll have four PIs, principal investigators. It, the success of that program is so contingent on the program management of it. So that's one example. And the other in gene therapies as well, there's another area where we might be supporting them with some sort of flow method, some sort of cellular method, pharmacodynamic method, for instance. But if they're dosed with a biologic, which is becoming much more frequent, now we're doing the PK and the ADA assessment as well as some biomarker work. And again, you can get upwards of 3 to 4 PIs on those projects. So that's great. Chris, I think this has been wonderful. I want to make sure we cover all topics for you. I think we're on there. Do you have some last, maybe counter to some of what John and I are saying, or any additional thoughts before we put you on the hot seat?
I think
Uh, yeah, go ahead,
what
John.
we one of the things that we had as a potential discussion topic. What your principal challenges within program management?
Oh, sure. Yeah. When we talk about COVID, that we've encountered a little bit of challenges becoming remote workers, as has most people. It really hasn't impacted our client interactions because most of our client interactions are prior to COVID were teleconferences and virtual meetings. I do miss the client site visits. Whenever the clients are on site, the program manager gets to sit down with them and take them to lunch or dinner and get that FaceTime. So we haven't had those lately, which is a bit of a challenge. But to the credit of our operations team, they've really stepped up and communicated with us virtually. They understand that we're not on site, that we need to speak to them via IM or Teams messages or email or phone calls. So they've really understood that, yeah, the PMs need to. That's been a little bit like, how do you get the information when you can't just go into someone's office and sit down and talk to them? Um, and then I guess the other major challenge, I would say, with program management, especially if someone's moving from like a lab bench into it, you need a type A personality. You need to make sure that things get done, but you also don't have complete control of the
Sure.
things. Like I'm accountable to make sure the data gets to the client, but I don't generate the data, I don't review the data, and I don't transmit the data. So you have to be able to want to make sure things get done, but be able to understand that it's other people's jobs to do those things.
Yeah, John, excuse me, Chris, that is powerful what you just said. That is not easy, and frequently I find myself amazed at the success that your PM team has at KCS with what you just said there, and that because you really if you have an A personality type, typically you're more at least have more direct. Uh, direct impact or direct oversight on things. So now you have to be an influencer, and really that is a wonderful trait that we have in our PM team because, as you mentioned, very heavy on the science side. So that actually becomes really very helpful for the principal investigators and the scientists they're working on because they have an understanding of the duration that something might take. So, Chris, I don't know if you have any more parting thoughts. I do think we had one last agenda item, which we can or can't get to, but
I think there is actually from our perspective. I mean, we are here as two senior scientific advisors. I'm very much on LCMS. Um, Dominic's very much on the LBA side of things, and we're sort of experts in our piece. But we don't know too much about the other. But a challenge for the program management team is, they may have a background in one, and it's a challenge and an opportunity, to quote a cliche. But ultimately, if they have a experience in one technology, they are going to have to be able to explain the other technology to customers, or be able to talk knowledgeably about that other technology. So there's the opportunity they get to learn about something new and different. But that to me is a challenge. That's just it's you've got to come up to speed pretty quickly on two very, very different bioanalytical approaches.
Yeah, absolutely, they do, and again, it kind of goes back to that team atmosphere that we've built. So we do have some PMs that have a major background in large molecule or ligand binding, and then other PMs that have a background in mass spec. And so we do lean on each other as well as our senior scientific advisors to kind of help guide us through things that we might not be as familiar with.
yeah,
The only other thing I'd really want to touch base on is client satisfaction because that's really what drives everything. So if we have a minute, I'd like to kind of touch base on that.
absolutely, Chris, please.
You could talk as long as you want.
So what we've done, and this is I think another thing that kind of differentiates KCS is we've custom built a client satisfaction database in which we track on a weekly basis the temperature of every client, every active client that we have. And that's been a very powerful tool in kind of not only seeing the current state of affairs, but also seeing maybe pinch points because we track it all the way down to operational units. So you can start to see, oh, in this unit, we're starting to see a little more dissatisfaction, which gives executive leadership the opportunity to kind of dig in and say, okay, what's going on here? Or, do we need resource constraints or what's happening? So that's been a really important tool in overall in helping KCS as a company understand how things are going in general. And then the other thing that satisfaction tool triggers is when a client moves off of the satisfied list, it triggers an escalation plan and a path, like what's going on with that client, what's the dissatisfaction, and what do we need to get them back to happy. And that's one of the other key elements of that is, it doesn't just make any sense to say this client's not satisfied. We need to say this client's not satisfied. What are we doing to get them back to the happy level? And because of that, I mean, I think it's also important to note that KCS leadership really understands that client satisfaction is a key factor, if not the key factor, in business growth. So they've invested in the program management team, and they understand the importance of a happy client and good communication and meeting our commitments to deliverables. And as such, they've invested in this program management team, and the cost isn't passed through to the client. It's not a billable charge for program management. This is an investment that KCAS is making in growth um, for the internal organization.
Yeah,
I,
Chris.
I
Go
have
ahead,
to
Jim.
say that when I joined the company, one of the things I was most impressed by was the customer satisfaction. You know, the update, regular update on what was going on, how closely it was being watched, and the fact that when customers went off that satisfied level, there was that discussion of how do we get them back, and it was really a lot focus on that, which really gels with my how I would like to approach things. So I really like this.
Yeah, I'll just add that, the way we're doing it here, the PMs are much more empowered to um, influence the client satisfaction. That's the differentiator. They actually have some control over it. And so that's what in other companies that I've been at, we would keep something similar, but to some degree, the program management team was like, what do you want me to do about it? We have mechanisms in place that they own it, and they're sort of influencing the operational side to ensure it goes back to green. And that's really, I think, an evolution of that program. So, Chris, this has been great. I don't know if you had any other items you maybe wanted to bring up or discuss.
No,
Feel
I
like
think
I thought I had one more thing I wanted to mention, but it's evaded me, and this has been a great discussion. So, any parting thoughts?
no, I think again, thanks for having me. I always enjoy talking about this, and yeah, happy to
Well,
answer any questions.
with that, Chris, if we're going to skip our client feedback and questions this week because I'm excited to put you on the hot seat. I hope
Okay,
you're ready
great.
for it because the first one is more of our first softball, but I'm really interested in question number two, which is going to be related to what you like to imbibe. But I'll ask the first question. And Chris, what was your favorite podcast episode?
Yeah, I this was kind of triggered. It reminded me. I just read the blog about the dose form analysis, and it reminded me of the podcast about dose form analysis. And I think that was in like December of last year. I really thought that was informative. I'm always interested to learn more information about service lines, and really I haven't had a whole lot of experience with dose form analysis, so that was enlightening to me. And then as a PM, anytime you hear of a potential solution or a potential explanation to discrepant data, it's one of those things. It makes your ears perk up, and you kind of put that in your back pocket for future use. And it really reminded me in a previous life, we I worked as a program manager for a manufacturing organization, and we had similar discussions with clients around risk of maybe not doing things versus the reward of doing them. So it kind of reminded me of some of those old days of kind of guiding clients into making good decisions.
So, if you want to learn more about dose form analysis, we actually have a webinar coming up next week to talk further on that subject. So, Dave Masters Moore will be presenting that webinar. I'll be joining
Cool.
him, but he's the lead.
I will be there.
Well, I guess I'll go with the second one. Actually, I'm going to mix you up a little bit on you, Chris. Drum roll, please. What's your favorite adult beverage?
I would probably always go with beer. My wife and I actually got married at the local Boulevard Brewery. But I, like everyone else during the pandemic, kind of started leaning more into the after work cocktail, and I discovered a drink called an Old Poblano, which is it's basically an old fashioned, but you replace the bourbon with aged rum, and instead of simple syrup, it is a ancho chili liqueur, and it's a pretty refreshing, kind of sweet and spicy and smoky little cocktail.
Wow.
Ooh, sounds good on a 95-degree, 100
Yeah,
degree index day like today, Chris. Ooh.
So
absolutely.
what's your rum of choice?
Oh, it's whatever my wife buys and it's in the house generally.
Well, I got a couple for you. Try something called Bumba,
Okay.
Bumba. That's a spiced rum. And then a 10 to 1 is another one that's real good rum.
So yes, for years I had no acquaintance with rum at all, and then we went for a week in Barbados, and there's the Mount Gay distillery there, and their XO rum is just unbelievably good. As I think is it the Black Barrel or Black Label well, they're all good,
Yeah.
and then But because when you're on the island for like a week, you go to the bars and everything's rum based, and you have to acquire a taste. It's fantastic.
And
Yeah.
it's a lot better when you're on a beach too, John. Just
Oh, sure, absolutely,
it
yeah.
just
So,
somehow it
so
tastes a little better.
yeah,
But
so we basically I did an Airbnb. This was all on impulse. We basically one Saturday morning I was looking at Twitter and saw a photo of a beach, and it was a beach in Barbados. Oh, that looks really nice. By that afternoon, I had booked an Airbnb without knowing anything about the island. It turned out to be this like little tin shack that we lived in for a week, but it was actually right on a beach, and within 50 yards of the shack was a beach bar, so you could basically order your drinks and then go into the Caribbean from the beach bar. So it was the perfect setup, apart from lack of air conditioning, which my kids moaned incessantly about, but it was a great thing to do.
lack of air conditioning. That's great. But Chris, you interestingly got married at a brewery. You said beer. Give us one beer that all of us should try.
Locally, I'm a big fan of the Space Camper for Boulevard. It's kind of a good one, I find. And then there's a brewery in Santa Rosa, California, that the name is escaping me, and they don't distribute anywhere outside of California. But gosh, it was one of my favorites. Um,
But I do know
yeah,
the Space Camper well. I feel like there's a series of Space Campers too, and I like those. That is a very good beer. Anyhow, well,
Russian River. That's the name of the brewery.
say
Russian
it
River.
again. Russian River.
Russian River Brewery.
Okay. That's one that's a deep cut for us, Chris. We appreciate that. Not going to find that at Barley's, am I? I'm going to have to
No,
look into that
no,
one,
you're
right?
not.
So with that, Chris, how about your favorite dish? Because we love to talk about food here on the Bio-Weekly Analysis.
Yeah, I'm a pretty simple guy, and my culinary skills are pretty limited. So steaks on the grill is generally my expertise. But I will tell you, my favorite dish that my wife and a friend of hers have ever made, it's called timpano. Dominic, are you aware of this? It's an
No,
Italian.
no, elaborate. Maybe, but sometimes names escape me. So go ahead, elaborate on it.
So timpano is you get this special timpano bowl. You fill it with dough, so much dough that it overflows, right? So you've got this bowl of dough overflowing the sides, and then you fill the bowl with meatballs and pasta and sausage and pork shank and hard-boiled eggs. So there's all these delicious things in it, right? And then when the bowl is full, you fold the dough back over the top, all right? And then you
Ah,
bake, and then you put it in the oven, you bake it. And when it's done baking, you take it out of the oven and you flip it over, lift the bowl off, and you've got this dome
I see
or
it now. So, Chris,
drum.
this is
So,
crazy.
so
No, I've never eaten anything like this, but I may try it.
is this one of those things you eat, and then you don't have to eat for another week?
Oh yeah, you need to have an army there if you're going to make it because
Funny. Do you make this, Chris?
my wife and a friend made it for I think it was my wife's 40th birthday, so it's been a few
Man.
years ago. It took them all day to make it. They handmade the meatballs and they did it all pretty much from scratch. I don't think they made the pasta from scratch, but
Well,
it
but I
was
got still impressive.
a labor of love. And yeah, so you flip it over, you take the bowl off, and there's this golden brown crust that you cut into and slice out, and it is decadent and
It's like the Italian version of like shepherd's pie, Chris, is what this is.
yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I grew up with something on Easter every year that's slightly it reminds me of this. It was something we called pizzagana. I don't even think you can find it, but it's a pie crust, and then it was like a layer of meat, ricotta cheese, layer of meat, ricotta cheese, layer of meat, ricotta cheese. You see where I'm going? And it
Yep.
was not quite as thick as this. It was about half the thickness of this, and man, that a 2-inch square piece was like a meal.
Right.
So that reminds me of this. So not, but this is, from what I can tell, this is something I'd love to take a stab at because it's up to the chef what goes in this thing. So I love those types of recipes. So Timballo, it's Timballo. Well, thanks for
Well,
that.
I've called it. Well, I think it's both timpano,
Oh,
timpano, like the drum, but I think it does also. Basically, it means drum, right? It's a
yeah. No,
drum.
so I do see that
Okay,
there's two
sure. Yep.
spellings, Timpano, and then the Timballo that I'm seeing. So anyhow, I love it, Chris, and hey, you might have just recorded the best dish and maybe even drink, although that has stiffer competition, but
Yeah.
certainly better
Yeah,
than
that's
John
made you lay
Perkins's
down your
Hattis.
gauntlet on this. Yeah.
Anyhow, I just Chris, we're going to wrap up with tell us a little bit about your weekend plans, and then John and I'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah, actually, I got a friend of mine texted me earlier this week. He had a free ticket to the Diamond Club of the Royals game, so that's going to be a fun outing. It's
Ooh.
Alex Gordon bobblehead night. So if you're not a fan of Kansas City baseball, Alex Gordon is one of the all-time greats for the Royals. He's going to be a Royals Hall of Famer. He retired 2 seasons ago, but because of the the strange season last year, he wasn't able to kind of do the whole tip of the cap to the fans to get a standing ovation after retirement. So it'll be nice to kind of go get a bobblehead toy and send Alex Gordon off with a standing O.
He may make the Hall of Fame, Chris. Not just the Royal. He's a lock-in for that, but with a
Yeah.
with a World Series ring and another appearance and the duration, and I think he what he hit like 296 or something. I feel like I don't know if he was a career 300 hitter, but he certainly won a lot of Gold Gloves, and of course his Nebraska baseball, maybe the best ever out of that as well. So but Chris, the Diamond Club, that's big time, buddy. That's got your own waitress, and that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yep. Yeah, a little worried about being amongst that many people. Haven't done it in a while, but I guess it'll be all right.
It's interesting. People. So I was at the USA soccer game that was in town last Sunday, where Team Canada played USA, and I've
Yep.
been to a few sporting games. Not the level of certainly much smaller venue than Royal Stadium, Kauffman Stadium. So,
Yep.
but you're right, Chris. It is. But hopefully you get over it real fast. Anyhow, well,
Yep,
with
surely.
that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
And so, John, tell us what's going on in your world.
So actually my world's been a little bit upended recently. So first of all, last weekend, my daughter, well, I'm not going to say what age she turned, but not only was it her birthday, but she got engaged. So we're going to have to figure out when she gets married. But that was great news for the family. And then this
Big
weekend, I'm actually,
congratulations. Hey,
yeah,
John, big congratulations for that. That's wonderful news.
sure, yeah, we're very happy about it. And then this weekend, I'm actually by myself. I was a little bit late to start the podcast because my wife and my youngest son are driving over to New Hampshire for my son and his fiance's bridal shower. So they're going for the weekend. I'm here looking after the cats and figuring out mowing the lawn and what else I want to do. But yeah, it should be 2 days of I can listen to lots of music, which would
I,
be great.
I
Actually,
was just thinking, are you going to play some guitar, or isn't that like one of your?
I'm not a musician. I just like to listen to music, but
Got
I've
it.
got plenty of music to listen to. Because the other part of last weekend was it was actually it was the second half of Record Store Day. Because with COVID, they've really broken Record Store Day down, and so I have a few purchases from that to listen to. So yeah, I'm set this weekend. I'll have a good time.
Yeah, and
just need to get through Friday so I can chill Saturday, Sunday. You know?
and I don't know. I haven't had too many opportunities to have a full weekend to myself, and I'm rolling up on 20 years of marriage, so that maybe I'll have
I
one more podcast before I have that happen to me. And
Yeah, I don't know when the last time was that happened with me, to be honest, where I was actually at home by myself. I mean, I've been away by myself an awful lot, but not actually
yeah,
in the house by myself. So, I think the only one thing is there's a local restaurant that we haven't tried during the pandemic, and they've really cut back their menu, but they do like a fried chicken for multiple people. So I'm actually going to get together with my daughter and her fiance on Saturday and do that. But yeah, it's relatively
fun.
low key.
And
Yeah.
and and so, John, I was saying, I could think of one time where I stayed here, and my son and wife went to Nebraska for an evening. I can't quite remember why I didn't go, but I just know I had. Don't fall victim to this. I had like, oh, I'm going to do this, and end up doing like almost nothing. So it sounds like you've got a plan. So you're more organized than I am. I was like,
I,
oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go here, and the reality is, I just the whole day slipped away from me. I think I
yeah,
spent most of it working out.
yeah, I did say to my wife, I have got really bad at reading books because I tend to go online and do stuff, and so I try to carry around books and then eventually open them and go through them. So at the moment, I'm reading Philip K. Dick. Oh God, the one that's been TV serialized,
It'll come to you. Don't worry
the
about
name's completely escaped me. But anyway, I did actually start reading that, and I think I'm about 6 or so chapters into it, and it's a great read. It's all about alternative reality. If Germany and Japan had won if the Axis had won the Second World War, it was an Amazon TV series.
I didn't see the series, but
So anyway, I'm reading the book, and I think I'm about page 67. I said to my wife, I'll get ambitious and do things, and if I'm lucky, I'll maybe get to like page 80 of this book. But we'll see how it goes.
So I'll wrap up with I was out last week in the Jersey Shore, had a great little 3/4 of my family visit down in the Jersey Shore area for a week, and we had a lot of fun, saw a lot of beaches, and happy to be back. This weekend I have it's going to be 100 degrees here, and my son is playing in a lacrosse tournament, so it should be an interesting weekend. I think I might invest in one of those big tents that can protect you, those little stands you put up, because it's supposed to be so warm. The good news is it's called the middle of the map, so there's some teams from out of state, which maybe gives me a little bit of pause. I'm glad he at least got that first vaccine, right? And then it's just down the street from us, which is nice. So that's okay, even though I think there's 4 games on Saturday, and then he's got maybe a potential 1 or 2 on Sunday. Just depends on how they do. And they did win their summer league championship this year, so that was fun. It's been a while since he had one of those, so that was good. Although it was just a T-shirt and a 4-team thing, but John, you count every championship in my book. So.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I still have my medals somewhere from where I was a kid playing soccer. And
I can only find my last medal. That's what I said to my son when he won. So and he's going to be a sophomore for So it's getting a little more real when you start to win things, I think, at this age.
Sure.
But so I'll enjoy a lot of outdoors in the heat. Don't have any. Been making a lot of the yellow rice and. Sort of this, kind of a blended, say, Indian and Mediterranean stir fry, and had that last night. But this weekend, due to that tournament, I had some desires to do some cool things, like maybe use my Uni pizza oven. And I got to mention pizza, John. It just has to be said. It wouldn't be right without talking about pizza. But I'm excited. Might get to that on Sunday. Just depends on how it goes. But that would be fun. And I got a little handgun for it now to take the temperature. I got to get myself a better spatula to get it in and out, though. So anyhow, we're going long. Chris, any parting words for us? Any last thoughts? It's been a pleasure to have you on. We hope to have you back on maybe perhaps sometime next year, but as you continue to build your team, we're excited to learn about all the great benefits and features that you bring to KCAS. Any parting words for us?
No, I appreciate you having me, and I look forward to the podcast, and coming back in the future.
And you'd be welcome to come back anytime, I think. And I'm looking forward to getting to page 80 of The Man in the High Castle. That was what I could remember.
The Man in the High Castle. And I might actually wrap up the 1,000-piece puzzle that I'm working on. That's a bunch of toilet paper rolls that it's taken me longer than any other puzzle. I'm getting there. I might have 100 pieces left, so I'm making some momentum with that. So with that, everybody have a great couple weeks, and we'll hear you on the next podcast, I suppose.
Yep, thanks very much. Have a good weekend.